First lines, paragraphs, and chapters. How to keep a reader hooked. The firsts. The first line of a book is the gateway to the last line. Readers are here for the firsts. They want to be right there with the character when they have their first kiss, their first win, their first big battle. It all starts with the first line. But how do you craft that first line hook that reels readers in, begging them to read more? How to. As Neil Gaiman says, this is how you do it. You sit down at the keyboard and you put one word after another until it's done. It's that easy and that hard. Keep this quote in your back pocket or on a sticky note by your desk because it's served me well over the years when I'm staring at the blank screen or stuck cursor, and I hope it might do the same for you. The first line. The first line is meant to ask a question without actually using a bit of punctuation, as well as give the reader a sense of the character and plot. Note, I said sense of. This is when you're giving hints. They should be strong no matter what, but can also have some punch, pizzazz, and still a sense of foreboding or whatever fits in with your story idea. This is the first exercise here, and the examples are from my books. Exercise 1. This example is as simple as they come. 1. With a bag slung over her shoulder, Penny Jones stood just inside the door to her New York City apartment. Can you identify the question? Is Penny leaving? Where is she going? Is she hesitating? If so, why? Exercise 2. It was not the most wonderful time of the year. Can you identify the question? Hint. This is from a Christmas novel. It can be inferred that the main character doesn't think Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year. It's also a romance, so the reader will want to know what's going to change her mind about that in order for her to get her happily ever after. Exercise 3. When the bell chimes, Rowan flashes me a smile as he walks toward the door. I keep it as a hope for someday. Can you identify the question? Why does the main character have to keep Rowan's smile for someday? Does she have a crush on him? If you saw the cover of the book and read the blurb, you'll have the bigger picture understanding that in the main character's world, survival is priority and love and romance would be a luxury, yet she yearns for that. So now that you know the rules, let's nudge them a little bit. Exercise 4. Variation. Charlotte Wheaton had once fallen in love, or so she thought. This is 2 lines, but can you identify the question? She had once fallen in love, but she's no longer in love? Why not? What happened? Why did she think she was in love? Can she trust herself to love, again or for the first time? Exercise 5. Variation. Can you keep a secret? I hope so. Otherwise, I suggest you stop reading right now. This one straight up asks a question, but also confides in the reader and then suggests they stop reading if they're not a secret keeper. Oof. This girl isn't messing around. Use this style carefully, because the voice in the book has to carry throughout. Compel the reader to keep going. If the first line is a crumb, the first paragraph is the slice of cake, but the fork has not yet been offered. Like the first lines, the first paragraph must hook the reader, spark curiosity, and contain something compelling enough for them to keep going. First paragraph. The first paragraph must also contain the elements already mentioned, as well as introduce character, setting, conflict, stakes. Note, I said introduce. No one wants to read a paragraph that is a page long, dumping the character's life story at once. So whether you jump in, starting with action, or have a quieter beginning, if the first line is the crumb, the first paragraph should have them begging for a fork. It should also prompt questions, as well as give the reader a bigger idea of whether they want to spend the next 5 or 8 hours, however long it'll take them to read your novel, in that particular world you've created. Exercise 6. I suggest you pull your 3 favorite books off the shelf or open them up on your device. Preferably books you've read more than once or would like to have another crack at. These are the kinds of books that are gripping. They kept you awake well past bedtime. Have a look at the first lines, the first paragraph. What works there? Identify the elements that I've outlined and keep them in mind, thinking about how they apply to your story. It sets the stage for everything to come. A few do nots. A few don'ts when it comes to the first line and paragraph. Do not start with the main character waking up. Do not start with a description of the character, especially if they're looking in the mirror. Do not talk about the weather. Do not include backstory. Don't do this. This is not to say you won't mention anyone's appearance, sleep habits, or weather. Of course the reader wants to know those things, but you're going to show that to them to the extent that it's relevant to the story. An exception to this might be in some futuristic story where the first line is, "It hadn't stopped snowing in 50 years. Well, that's compelling. Sounds like a nightmare to me. I immediately want to know why it hasn't stopped snowing. What I'm referring to in the don'ts is more like this. Sally woke up and it was a sunny morning. She combed her long brown hair and stared at her big brown eyes in the mirror. Do not do that. Much of these details can come later in a manner of showing the reader the lives of the characters in the world, which brings us to the first chapter. Think of it this way. The first line is someone knocking on your door or calling you. You're curious, so you answer. Then they present you with an invitation. Bonus if they also have a cake and a fork. Maybe that's to take a trip to the moon, back in history, or on an exotic romantic getaway. That is your first paragraph. Then, when you move past that into the first chapter, that's when you've said, yes, I'll check it out. Now, it's up to you to repeat that formula in every chapter. The first line, first paragraph, chapter content. Repeat. The W's. The first paragraph is going to take everything you've shared with the reader so far and take it further. Continuing with the theme of the first line and paragraph, prompting the reader to ask questions, the first chapter is your opportunity to expand, weaving in central elements without giving everything away or info dumping. Now you get to answer questions while at the same time leaving the reader with more questions that they'll want to answer. Go back to primary school lessons for your first chapter with the W's. Remember those? Who? Who are the players in the character's current world? Friends, enemies, love interests? What? What's going on? What is the central conflict? Where? The setting, the world, the rules of the world if it's not our own. Status quo. This is the character's world, whether it's war-torn or perfect and about to fall apart, because as we know, something is going to change. When? Is it sometime in history, the future, present day? Why? Whatever is going on, why does the main character care? Why should the reader care? You know the Rolling Stones song, you can't always get what you want, but if you could try sometimes, well, you might just find you get what you need? Well done, Mick and Keith. Well done. This song illustrates the tension the characters must experience between the thing they think they want, but ultimately what they discover they need as their character arc evolves. And you can thank me for not singing that to you. Oh, bonus. How? Bonus. If you think about a story like an equation, you have to solve for C, the conflict. In the first chapter, you don't have to show how the hero will save the day or that they will fall in love, but there needs to be at least a hint of what's to come. It might be a long, perilous road or a drama-filled affair, but a hint at how it might all work out or fail miserably in the end is the promise that you make, so the reader is willing to invest their time and keep reading. Plus, the essential elements. In the first chapter, also continue to develop the character, conflict, and stakes. Because so many people read digitally now and don't necessarily have to go back to the store or library to get a new book if they don't like the one that they've picked, if they aren't hooked by the first line or paragraph or chapter, it's easy to move on to the next book. Make those firsts hooky and punchy to entice the reader to want to continue reading.